Let me be direct with you from the outset. What we are witnessing in southern Lebanon is not the conventional ground engagement you are hearing about in mainstream media reports. It is not a story of tactical attrition or gradual territorial gain. What we are witnessing is a strategic collapse of the most elite units of the Israeli military, a reality that is being carefully obscured by official narratives but is playing out in real time on the ground. I am looking at field reports and communication intercepts that have been circulating among regional security analysts for the past 72 hours, and I need you to look at them with me because what they show is not a routine defensive maneuver. It is not a static frontline engagement. It is not an organized withdrawal. What it shows is the capture of 4 high-ranking field commanders and the subsequent immediate retreat of the entire operational unit, followed by the frantic commencement of secret diplomatic back-channel talks. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this development marks a turning point in this conflict, why the traditional military metrics are no longer applicable to the realities on the ground, and why this shift will fundamentally alter the geopolitical posture of the entire Levant. This is an analytical briefing for those who refuse to accept the sanitized versions of events presented elsewhere. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is based on data, intelligence, and a level of analytical rigor you are not getting from the standard news cycles. Let us start with the geography and the historical context of the current engagement zone because it explains why this specific sector has become a graveyard for conventional tactical assumptions. The terrain in southern Lebanon is not flat. It is a series of rugged, interlocking valleys and high ground positions that were specifically designed by Hezbollah over the last 2 decades for exactly this type of asymmetric warfare. To put the scale of the challenge in perspective, an Israeli mechanized infantry unit, highly trained, well equipped, and backed by constant aerial surveillance, is attempting to navigate terrain where their heavy armor is essentially neutralized. They are facing an adversary that does not engage in traditional formations. They are facing an adversary that operates using a decentralized cell-based structure where the tactical intelligence is distributed rather than top-down. According to military analysts focusing on regional security, this specific unit had been tasked with a high-priority mission to clear the border villages. Yet, the reality they encountered was far more sophisticated than their intelligence briefings suggested. As one senior regional security observer noted, the tactical environment is effectively a trap where technology loses its advantage against intimate knowledge of the terrain. This is where the narrative of conventional superiority begins to unravel, and it is why we must look closer at the actual events. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. Now let us talk about what actually happened on the ground during this engagement. Announcement number 1, the capture of 4 elite commanders. And this one matters more than anything else happening in this theater right now because it shatters the aura of invincibility surrounding these specific military units. These were not junior officers or inexperienced infantry. These were highly decorated senior-level field leaders responsible for coordinating the offensive operations across the northern front. The reports confirmed by multiple sources on the ground indicate that these individuals were not targeted in a long-range strike, but were isolated and captured during a complex, multi-layered ambush that allowed for no defensive response from their support units. Their extraction was impossible, and their loss has created a vacuum of command that led to the immediate and chaotic retreat of the remaining forces in that sector. The technical specifications of this operation, the coordination, the timing, and the precision, suggest a level of intelligence capability that the opposition clearly underestimated. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, the secret talks have already begun. This is the part that the official military spokespeople are, unsurprisingly, omitting from their statements. The loss of these commanders, coupled with the rapid degradation of unit cohesion, has triggered a crisis in the chain of command, necessitating an emergency pivot toward diplomacy. This is not a voluntary diplomatic initiative. This is a desperate attempt to contain the fallout of a tactical disaster. Stay with me because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the implications for the wider conflict become impossible to ignore. When you see a military force that prides itself on its intelligence capabilities being caught so completely off guard and then immediately scrambling for a political exit, you are seeing the result of an intelligence failure that goes all the way to the top. Announcement number 3, and this one almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly. The retreat is not limited to this single sector. It is beginning to affect the broader operational readiness of the military across the northern border. Because the unit that suffered this loss was the spearhead for the entire campaign, their forced withdrawal has created a vulnerability that is already being exploited elsewhere. The reason this outcome is the same as the failures of the past is that the institutional arrogance, the belief that air superiority and intelligence can overcome a determined, entrenched, and well-organized adversary, is a repeating, fatal error. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now let us talk about what is really happening behind the headlines because there are two stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. We see the official press releases claiming operational success and strategic adjustments, but look at the actions, not the statements. When a leadership team responds to a crisis by calling for immediate, secret diplomatic talks with neutral third party intermediaries, that is not a sign of a coordinated military strategy. That is a verdict. Think carefully about what this represents. When an entity tasked with a clear military objective suffers a decisive tactical defeat and their immediate reaction is to seek a ceasefire rather than reinforcement, it reveals that they know the cost of continuing this operation is no longer politically or militarily sustainable. It is a tacit admission that the conventional model they are relying on is broken. If you follow the energy markets, the logistics chains, or the regional security indices, what is happening in southern Lebanon is not just a foreign policy story. It is a story about the fragility of the entire regional status quo. If these units are retreating, and if the High Command is seeking back-channel salvation, it means the deterrent capability that was the foundation of regional policy is being rewritten before our eyes. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. Look at the Soviet experience in Afghanistan. A global superpower with overwhelming technological and numerical superiority entered a rugged, mountainous environment, convinced that their conventional might would force a swift conclusion. Instead, they found themselves bogged down in a conflict where the adversary knew the terrain better, held the moral and political advantage, and utilized that asymmetry to systematically dismantle the superpower's will and capacity to continue. The parallels here are exact. The technological superiority, the belief that local opposition could be easily suppressed, and the eventual realization that the cost of persistence far outweighed any potential strategic gain. The superpower bleeds itself dry, the proxy forces become more entrenched, and the ultimate result is a humiliating withdrawal that changes the domestic political landscape of the occupying power forever. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths, because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, the optimistic scenario for those currently in command. They managed to secure a rapid, face-saving ceasefire, spin the capture of their commanders as a negotiation hurdle, and freeze the conflict in a way that allows them to claim they achieved some semblance of their original objectives. The likelihood of this is low given the current momentum and the political stakes involved. Path 2, the realistic scenario. The tactical disaster continues to leak, the internal pressure within the government forces a total shift in command structure, and the conflict escalates into a wider, more public humiliation as the retreat turns into a rout. The consequences for regional stability would be catastrophic as the security architecture of the last 3 decades effectively collapses. Path 3, the long-term strategic shift. The reality of the tactical failure forces a fundamental reassessment of the entire regional policy. This means an end to the reliance on overt military force and a transition toward a new, multipolar regional arrangement that recognizes the new realities on the ground. I think we are closer to Path 3 than the headlines suggest because the cost of continuing is simply too high. But the caveat is that the transition will be neither smooth nor peaceful. Here are the questions I want you to take away. Who actually benefits from the ongoing obfuscation of these events? Why is the mainstream media so invested in maintaining a narrative that is demonstrably disconnected from the reality on the ground? And what happens to the regional order when the myth of the unbeatable military force is finally irrevocably shattered? Tell me in the comments what you think the administration does next. Tell me if you think we are on Path 2 or Path 3. We will keep tracking every development in the Levant because that is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand why the situation on the ground is changing so rapidly. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and we will see you in the next analysis. What is the single most significant development you have observed in the last 48 hours that contradicts the official military narrative in this conflict?